Hi guys, this is Joseph again, and today I'm excited to start a solo tutorial. And the tutorial is going to be about interior rendering, and this is for the architect who wants to do architectural visualization, and this is a good one for you guys. And this is a test render I did, so we are going to work with this scene. Don't mind the grain, and the software is trying to catch up with this, and I tried as much as to use the very fairly low settings for that, but then I tried to make a realistic render, and every time I try to do that and I check videos online, I see people making use of third-party renderers to render. Most of the tutorials you get online, to get a very good rendering artwork, you get to use third-party renderer. But I thought to myself that how would it be if I could do something within the Cinema 4D rendering machine and without having to use third-party renderer. Most people don't have the money to get these softwares or these plugins, but how can we at least make use of Cinema 4D and still come up with a very good render? And I got to know about some of the settings, and I tweaked some and learned some also online, and I came up with this render. And this is the whiteboard render, this is the white render, and this is when you have the material, and you can see that it is fairly good. It's good for presentation, at least a little bit realistic. It might not be that really realistic, but at least it's still okay for presentation. So we're going to go into the software and talk about this. By the way, I've dropped down the project file for this tutorial I'm about to talk about, that we are going to talk about now, so you could just head into the description and download the project file so you can follow along with the tutorial. Alright, so let's go into the software. Alright guys, so the first thing we are going to do is I'm going to go over to the render settings. I'll click here, then I'm going to first off come to the output, reduce this value by 2, divided by 2, just for tutorial purpose, so that I can have a faster render. Now I would also come to these options. I will take off this blurriness. This blurriness gives it tons of render time, so removing this reduce the render time. Then I'm still going to remove this default light, but for my first render I need this default light so that I can have a scene render. Then I'm going to reduce this to 3. And the thing about this value is that, notice I said reduce, and it was from 0.1. The thing with threshold is that the higher the value, the lesser the quality. So the lower the value, the higher the quality. So, but the thing is, with this value 3 and that value 0.1, you tend to see less changes. So you still work with that. So this is 10. This is also 10, and I'm good with that. Then for this place, I'm going to check this material override. Now the reason why I need to check the material override is my first render, I don't want to have texture. I just want to override the texture with a texture which has been added here. So if I click here, you would also have this file, and this is the texture which I have added here, but I have excluded one texture from it, which is the glass texture. The glass texture is what I added to this table and this exterior part of the glass, and the reason for that is by the time I start adding light, I can have the reflection or the light penetrating through the glass. If this wasn't added, if it wasn't excluded, then you won't see ray of light coming into the room. So I hope that makes sense. So we have this. So another thing is, I want to, if you look at this wall, I feel the intensity or strength of the bump and normal is too much, so I'm going to reduce that. So I'll go up. I know that this is the material I used for them, so I'm sorry I didn't name them. So I'll double click this, go to the bump. I want you to see what happens here. here as I change. So I'm going to change this value. You notice that the intensity of that bump gets reduced, yeah, or the strength rather. So I'll do that for the next one, which will have effect here. So the bump is already reduced, so I can just reduce it a bunch more. Then the normal, I'll take this very low, and I think we are good with that. So I'm going to render into my picture viewer, and let's see what we have. So if I click, so you see what we have right now. Okay, and this looks very bad. I'm really ashamed of this. This is very funny. You can't really send this out to clients to you won't get enough clients. So but then that coming up, this is just what we get to have. You can notice the glasses up here and also the rug. Now the rug, we'll talk about that later on. So click, let's start setting up our scene. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my infinite light, and this infinite light is going to serve as the sun. So let me rename it by double clicking on this, call it sun. So I want to start being organized. So now I'm going to add a null object. This null object is going to serve as my target, the target for the sun. So I'm going to rename this target. Then I'll go to the sun, I'll right click on the sun, go to cinema 4D tags, then go to targets. So I'm going to make the target object, make target the target, alright. So I'm going to make target the object to reference into this target tag. So you notice I have this target selected. Under this place I just dragged in this target here, and as soon as I do that, see what happens. So if I go to move to, remember this, I can move the sun and move it out. So as I'm doing this, you notice that the Z position is targeted to the position for where the null is. So if I move this null and move it about, you can notice that the sun follows it about wherever it goes. So I'm going to bring the null somewhere here. Then I'll go to the sun, take it out. So I will go out of the camera. Let's just bring the camera up so that I can have. So if I go out of the camera, go to the sun, move the sun out here, so we can have the sun somewhere here. And I'm sorry, don't mind my mouse is not here, so I'm having issues with, so I'm going to bring the sun somewhere here. I think that is okay. Then I'll go into the camera again. Then the sun, some settings I will set, some settings I'm going to have is I'm going to first off make it an area light, then change the intensity of this to 150. So I'm going to have that. So let's see what we're going to have with this render. So if I hit render, let's see what we have. Okay, so we can see what we have here now. Everything looks so dark, and this is what we have. Then you can only see the sun interacting up to this place, and it looks so dark here. We barely see anything. And also look at the render time, 27 is not small. So let me bring the target so that the sun can interact a little bit with this so far. Then do another render. So let's see what we get to have. Alright, the thing about this is that you need to tweak some settings. You need to go back and forth to change some things. You don't just stay one place and end there. So you can see that the sun is coming up, but it is not reaching up onto the sofa. I'm going to do that, but while I do that, I'm still going to add in another light, but I feel everything is just too dark. So if I add in another light, area light, that is going to create a kind of illumination. So I'm going to rotate this area light such that the Z position faces inside the room. Now the Z position is the direction of the sun or of the light, so the direction is usually the Z position. So I'm going to take it out of the room. Then I'm going to also navigate around, bring this up. I'm sorry, I have to use the icon on this place because my mouse is not here, so just bear with me. So I'm going to bring this backwards a little bit. Then the lights, I am going to give it an area light, also an area shadow. Now I'm going to reduce this strength. I don't want to overshadow the sun, so I'm going to reduce it all to 70, and that is much what okay. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the detail section of it, to the detail tab, then come down to where I have this fall off. So the thing about fall off is that, let's come out. You notice the position of this light without this fall off. If I render, what I'm going to be having is that the intensity I'm having at this position will be the same intensity I'm going to have up onto this place, and that is not realistic. We are trying to create a realistic rendering of a real life simulation. So, and the intensity of light usually is brighter at the point of creation, and as the ray goes out, the intensity fades and goes down. So that is what the fall off does. So if I click on this fall off and go to the inverse square, because that is a physically accurate one, it creates this circle around the light. You can see this circle around it. That is the fall off radius. So I'm going to reduce the radius of this fall off such that it gets up to the end of the TV, such to say. You can see if I bring it out, you can see the way this thing is. You can notice that. So I want it to get up onto the end of the TV, so I don't want it to be too washed out. So once I'm done with this and setting are all correct, I have the area shadow set and all that. So I'm going to do another render test to see what I'm going to have. And by now I should have a higher render time. You know, we had 32 before now, so this should be more than 32 seconds, but you will have a better render. Your scene is going to be lit better than what we had before now. So let's hold on for that. Okay, so you can see what we have now compared to when we didn't have the area lights, and the area light has really helped the scene, helped light the scene well. So we have this coming up, and I feel this is getting okay, and I'm liking what I'm getting. Though we have a lot of grains, and that is normal. It's just, we've not done any settings, we're just adding light, so it's normal to have grains in the scene. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the third light, a source of light rather, and this is called the physical sky. Now this physical sky work based on real life information. If you look at the attribute manager for the physical sky, you have the time and location, so that can allow you to set the location wherever you are. So if you're in Africa, for instance, and I'm in Nigeria, I can go to Nigeria, go to the location where I am going to, either Abuja or Lagos. If you are in any other place, maybe in Europe, you can go to anywhere in Europe where you are. You can just set your location, and you're going to have the environment, the weather condition of that location you set also set here. So I'm going to go with the custom, with the default. The only thing I'm going to do is just change the location of the sun. Now if you notice, I added my artificial sun somewhere here, and I need to also set the location of this sun. See where the sun is just right back at this cushion or this sofa, so I need to rotate this such that the sun is at that same place where I had my own artificial sun. So I'm going to set it up onto this place and come here to the setting. If you go to the sky or the sun, you can see you can set the intensity of your sun and all that. So let's just match the same value we had here. So we had 150 here, so I'm going to go to the sun. The intensity also should be 150 so that everything comes in sync and all that. So let's render what we have and we'll be back. Alright, so we are here, we have that, and we have this. You notice this tend to become too bluish, and you have a hue of blue color on in the scene, and that's just how it is, because it's making use of the sky. The sky is blue, and so you're having the bounce of the hue color of the sky around the room. And the reason why we have this intense, we have this blue being this intense, is because physical sky work best with a new setting, another setting I'm going to talk about, which is called global illumination. And because global illumination is not on, that's why we have this. So I need to add in the global illumination so that we can make room for this bluish color and have everything lit normally. So for us to add the global illumination, you go to your render setting, which is this, then go to the effect. You will see global illumination here, so add it. So the global illumination, the setting I'm going to change this to low. Come to this, change it also to low, then reduce this. I'm just doing this. You can up it if you want to have a higher quality, but just put in mind it's going to take a render time, so you should also know that. So let's bring this to custom, and let's have 512. Have a custom count, so this is fine. Every other thing I think is fine. So let's go with this setting. This is just like a basic small render setting that we have, so let's go with that. So just close this, and okay, I can also up the gamma, so I will just increase the value to 2. It also brightens the scene a bit. So let's render and see what we get. Alright guys, you can see that it's taking 9 minutes already, and you can see the scene is coming out cleaner than the one we had here. Everything was bluish in color, and just by adding the global illumination, the blue color has been taken off, and you see this lit well. So you can see the change in this just by adding the global illumination. Though it's going to take a ton of render time, you need to know that it's going to take a render time because this is trying to simulate real life effect, real life light bounce effect. So the way light bounces in the real life is trying to simulate that also on the system. So depending on your system's configuration, you might have a faster render than mine. I'm using just a small laptop, so I'm just having 2 GB graphics card, external graphics card, so NVIDIA. So you can see, so it depends on what system configuration you're having, but then you can see that the render is kind of cleaner and better than when we had this. So I'm going to go back to the start point where we didn't have light. So we come back to this scene. This was when we didn't have light at all. Then after adding lights, we had this the area light. Remember the sun, my artificial sun. Then later I added the area light that lit this whole place, at least for us to see every other place. Then we added the physical sky. Then we have this. Now after adding this physical sky, I added the global illumination, and we already have this being lit very well. But you still have some grains, some grains here, so we'll talk about how you set that. Alright, so minimizing that, so let's look at the settings. So everything we're going to be doing now is going to be back and forth from the render settings and rendering the whole thing. So I'll go back to the render setting. We have that. So we are using the least render so far. So I'm going to add in one more thing. Now another thing I didn't remove is the default light, so we don't want to have that, so I'm going to take this off. Then the renders we had so far have been for standard renderer, so so I'm going to take the renderer, change it to physical. The physical is more accurate because it also simulates physical based rendering or simulation. So I'll go to the physical tab, go to the advanced, change the ray trace engine from Embry faster to physical so that it can simulate a physical rendering. Then the next thing I'm going to do is, because I'm not having subsurface scattering here, you understand that by the time I get into texture, so I'm taking that off. Ambient occlusion, taking it to 1. Blurriness, subdivision, let's take that to 3. I think that is okay for here, so I'm going to make this fixed. Okay, let's go with low. Then I think I'm going to go back to the global illumination. I'm going to up, for me to get rid of all these, I'm going to up some settings here. So I'm going to change the count. No, not that, sorry about that. So I'm going to change this secondary method. Now the light bounce is making use of only one method, which is the primary method of caching the lights of the scene. So I've not made anything for the secondary, so I'm going to go to the secondary, make it light mapping. Now light mapping, I'm going to change this maximum depth to 32. I'm upping this by 2 of that. So now if you also look here, if you feel that the room is too lit, is too bright, you can go back to this gamma and reduce it. So I'm going to reduce it to 1.5 instead of the 2. I'm going to make it 1.5, and I think that is much it here. That is pretty much what I'm going to do here. And I've changed this to light mapping. Light mapping is more accurate than any other options we have here, so light mapping is the best here. So I'm going to go with that and close, then do another render. Once we're done with this, then I'll try and set for material and see how it looks. So I'm going to render and pause and come back after the render. Okay, so you can see we are already at 13 minutes plus, and we have this scene coming up, and is clean now. It is clean now. If you look into this area, let me zoom into that place so you see what I'm saying. You can notice it had a lot of grains here, but now it has been cleaned much, and you have the illumination. And also coming down to this place, when we started with the normal GI, global illumination, we just had everywhere being lit, but when we change this to light mapping, you tend to see interaction of the color from this rug fitting here. So that is why I talked about this rug just then, that you should not worry about that. I wanted you to see this interaction, and that is it about global illumination or realistic lighting. When you are in a room and you are close to, you put a colored object close to you, you tend to see a bounce of the color of that object on a neighboring object, a different neighboring object. So that is what we are seeing here. And look also outside. I'm kind of liking this. Compare this to this. I'm kind of liking what I'm getting. So basically this is just the setting that we get. So what we'll be doing is just upping up the values until we get a good and realistic render approach. So what I'm going to do now is, I think we're done with the white render. Let's start putting up materials and changing something. So for me to put up the materials are already up. The only thing I just need to do is just come to this override and uncheck it. So the next render we do is going to have the whole material set. So I think we should just do, I'm done with the setting, so we just do a final render for this. So for my final rendering, I usually take it from fixed to adaptive, but we can go with that fix, but just change this sampling subdivision value. Now if I increase this value twice this size, what it does is that it's going to increase the value, but let me just take it 3. I don't want to go overboard. So the higher the value for the sampling, the more it samples, and the cleaner the render is going to be. So I think that is okay. And another thing is yeah, I need to also, this is fine, physical. Let's go to the global illumination, and we have 32. That is fine. So this sampling, I'm going to change this. I'm also going to multiply this by 2 so that we have 10,024. that is, we have 1024 rather. Then we come to this place, and I think this is fine. Everything is fine here. I don't want to up those settings because of time. So we are good with this. Output fine, option, light is all fine, all these things are fine. So you can see my settings here. Now one more thing I'm going to add. Now this is going to take time, but we still need to add it. So if you look at this render, I need to have an indirect shadow for all my objects having contact. Wherever you have objects having contact with another object, there should be a kind of shadow, like down here there should be a kind of shadow under for you to see that this object is interacting. Okay, what I'm going to do is, before I start the material, let me still add this back and go back to my initial settings 512. I'm sorry, I just have to go through this so that you can see the difference. So I'm taking this back to 2. I can even take it to 1 just for the purpose of seeing that. So I'm going to reduce these values so that you can see. I'll come back and change this. So we have 1. This global, let me reduce this by 2, so we have this. I'm lowering the settings. Let me reduce this to 16. So what I'm doing is just reducing the settings so that we can have a faster render for you to see the next thing I'm going to add. So I'm going to add a global illumination. What the global illumination will do is going to create a contact shadow between objects. So you have an object interacting with another object, there should be a contact shadow showing that it is not floating in the air. It's actually on a particular surface. You can see these frames. It's not actually showing that they are on the wall. So adding that will try to create that illusion of that. So I'm going to go to this. I don't want this shadow to be too intense, so I'm going to give the lighting here. Then I'm going to reduce this wavelength to something 70. Then dispersion, how you want the shadow to be dispersed. I want to shrink it to 65 and just bring this down a touch somewhere here. And let's do my final render before I start adding material. So I'm going to start this, then come back after that. Alright, so we can start to see what we have. This already is giving us 8 minutes of render, and you can see the interaction. Don't mind how grainy it looks because of the setting that I've changed. You can see this showing an interaction with the wall. You can see this wall and this other. So you are seeing this shadow that you didn't see here. You can see it because it's showing that there is an interaction. Also, wherever you have all these creases, you see the interaction. Look at the wall. You can notice that. So that is what ambient occlusion does. That is what it does. It shows that, okay, something is interacting. Look at the end of this and this place. It's not showing that this was created and they are joining together. So I hope you understand why that is there. So it also, so what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go back and up the render setting and take off this. So the first thing is I want to take off this material override, go to the ambient equation, nothing here actually, so I'll go to the global illumination. Remember we changed this setting, so I'm going to take this back to 1024. That's higher setting. So I'm like doing a final render. This is 32, so I'm going over that again, coming to this place. I think I didn't touch anything here, so light mapping and this. Then we'll go to the physical. We change this from 2, so I'm going to up this to 3, this subdivision to 3. This is physical, that's fine. What else? Fine. Pretty much that's all we need to do. So that's just pretty much the settings that we have. So I'm going to do my final render, and when I'm back you will see the output of what we've got. Alright, okay. Alright, so you can see the render is already taking 27 minutes and you have the output. This is what we get to have. And don't forget, I'm having this because I have reduced the resolution, the pixel size of the image. So this is not a large size. I'm not using full HD. I'm using, if you go to the render setting under the output, you know I reduced this. So if I am to use what I had before, 1280 by 720, that's not even full HD, but it's still HD. If I'm to use that, the render time would not be this, it will be higher than this with all. So you should also put that in mind. And when you want to do your final render, you should not work with this. You should either make it 1920 by 1080 or 1280 by 720. So that is that. So we have the output. So this is what we get to have as the output, and it took exactly 28 minutes 54 seconds, which is basically just like 29 minutes for me to have this render. Now for you to get something like this, normally before now I couldn't get, don't mind the cushion, don't mind this so far. This is not texture tutorial, so but what I'm trying to say is, for you to get something as clean as this from Cinema 4D would be hard. Most people don't know about the settings to get this. For them to get this, they had to use third-party renderer, rendering machine and all that. But then we got this out using Cinema 4D and without any third-party renderer. So all we did was just to tweak some settings in the software, and we got something as clean as this. But what I do is my workflow. I'm giving us a whole workflow. What I do is to go over and save this object as a PNG. So I'll right click on it, save it as a PNG. It's lossless, so I'm going to make it 16 bits, so I have more. Then I'll up the value here to 300 dot per inch. Then I'll save this. So I'm going to save this to my desktop. So I'm going to save this scene start rendered 1 to my desktop. So I'm going to save that. So the image that I just saved, I'm going to take it to Photoshop and tweak it. You notice some parts is underexposed. I want to expose them more and make it look a lot nicer. I want to have all these things. So after saving this, I'm going to head over to Photoshop, and this is the image I saved out here. So I'm going to drag this image into the Photoshop. Then I have this. So the first thing I do is, let me take this off. The first thing I do is I add in an adjustment layer and add in level. Then the level will allow me set how exposed or how I will make the contrast of this to be. So I can use this level to, I can just, let me get rid of this level, let me not use this level. So I can use curve. I start with curve. Then I want the highlight to be much. you tend to see the effect you get here. So I want the highlights to be a little bit up, then the shadow to come down a little bit. I think just something subtle, not too much, something subtle. So then I have something like this. If you were to check what I had before, you tend to see just a little change, not much. That is how it's meant to be. Then I'm going to add in a brightness and contrast adjustment layer. So I want to up the brightness, then the contrast should also come up a little bit. You tend to see that this part is becoming, if I hide this, see what is happening. So maybe I want this to come down a little bit. Then let's see if there is need for exposure. How exposure, I want that's too washed out, so I don't want that. I think we don't need exposure actually, so I'm going to take this off. So if you look at what we had, this is what came from Cinema 4D. After adding curve we have this, then after we have that. So this looks more, so I can even use the opacity to set how intense I want this to be. So if I make this 75, it's less intense compared to when it was at 100. Notice that. So let's make it 70. Another thing I'm going to do is to select this layer that I have. Let me duplicate it so that I can have something to reference. So Ctrl J is to duplicate, by the way. So select the layer you want, hit Ctrl J to duplicate. So by the way, if you don't have Photoshop, you might just skip that. And so then I'll select this, go to my filter menu. So this is cut off from my screen now. You go to the menu, let me see whether I can bring this up so you can see. Okay, let me just, so we can see that. So this is the filter. So you select the layer, you go to filter, then you convert it to smart object, because what I'm about to do now, it only applicable to smart object. So I'm going to convert it to smart object. Then once I have it converted, this is now smart object. I can now go into the filter, go to camera raw filter. So this is just like taking in your normal DSLR camera and working on the functionality of the camera. So you tend to see similar functionality on your camera with what you have here. So it's trying to bring it up. So we have this image showing up here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I can also set the exposure here. So you can see basically everything I did here. I can also do all those things. I set the exposure, set my contrast, then the highlights to push. Can see what is happening. So I want the highlights to come down a little bit from this place. Then the shadow, notice what is happening to this area. The shadow is the darkest part. So if you want the darkest part to be dark, you tend to come down here. So I want the shadow to have a little bit of illumination. Okay, so then the clarity, how, if you want it to be not to be clear, you see what you have. You want it to be clear, but once you go back over body, you get to have this sharp image. So you should walk very subtle. So then also come to your temperature. If you want to have an evening feel, you can bring it towards the blue part, the blue hue. You tend to have a bluish color having like an evening feel. But if you wanted to have like an afternoon feel, you tend to use this to bring it up, push it up, then you have that. I think I love this. Okay, so I have that afternoon feel just a little bit. Then we'll come to this effect. We have grains. Now most of the time when we render, everything looks very perfect, clean, and doesn't bring that realism. but when you use your normal camera, you tend to have a little bit of grain to it, so you can add an amount of grain. If I go overboard, you see what we have on the screen. So I just want the grain to be just a little minimum, maybe a value of 2 or 3 should be fine. Then the size of the grain, 25 is too much, so I'll bring this back to that. Then the roughness, I don't want it to be too rough, so let's say somewhat something here. Then talking about vignettes, you can add vignettes around your image, just like an effect. So if you want your vignette to be directed towards the white color, you can just move this, or black color vignette, you can use this. So I tend to use more of black vignettes, so come to this and bring it down a little bit. I feel the grain is too much, so I can still come to this size. Let's make it 2, make this grain 2, the roughness 2, so we don't have too much of that. And I feel that is the setting I want to have here, so I'm just going to click OK. Then you see what I have. This is what came, let me turn this off. This is what came from Cinema 4D. Then after everything, I have this. You can see the difference. You can see the difference. Cinema 4D, and after taking it in Photoshop, we have this effect. Then I can add this if I choose to. Then I feel this is too much. Adding this brightness is much, so I can take this off. Curve is still okay. Then once I'm done, I'm going to save this out as PNG. Then go to my desktop and make this 2. Save. Then I'm going to bring both side by side so we can see. So we have this first one and the second one that I saved. So where are you? So this is the second one, this is the first one. So if I'm to open the first one, window right, open the second one, window left. So you have both. So let me bring this up a touch so we can see both images. So you see what we have. After rendering from Cinema 4D, we have this. Then taken to Photoshop, then we tend to touch the image to have the final product of this. So there you have it, guys. That is my workflow, and that is how I did the interior rendering, and that's how I do my interior lighting without a third-party renderer. And I feel this is good. I'm happy with this result that I have. And please, if you like this video, please just hit a like on the button. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe. You can also like and share this video. You don't know who might learn from this. And like I always say in my videos, this is a new channel and I'm growing, and I would really appreciate if you help grow the channel. And thank you, and God bless. Peace out.